Hello, everyone. So today, what I'd like to do is it looks like it's just a small group of us today. Um, I just kind of want to open up discussion for questions on clarification about what is it um, that you wish to research for this term. And so I kind of want to open up the floor to what your ideas are, and maybe we can kind of help hone them in. Um, and give kind of a better idea in discussion. I imagine that because it's the three of us, it'll be relatively short, or the four of us, it'll be relatively short, but kind of give a good idea for those who are watching on YouTube to get a good idea of what kind of questions we should be asking. So, what I'd like to be able to do is for all of you to just kind of jump in and just give me an idea of what you think you might want to do, and then we can kind of discuss it and share ideas with it, and where would be a good like research question or a thing to look at or sources to look at or ways to frame your research question. So we'll see what we can get to today. So with that, I kind of want to open the floor, and if anybody wants to go ahead and jump on in.
I'm sorry, what's going on? I came in late because I have another class that runs till 4:15.
That's fine. So what we're doing is we're discussing what ideas we have for what we would like our research topic to be, or what we're thinking about our research topic to be, considering that the form for the proposal is on Tuesday, is due on Tuesday. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to kind of, just kind of workshop and brainstorm some ideas of what we might want to do, what you guys might want to do, and then gives me an opportunity to give you some initial feedback.
Okay.
So if anything, Nikita, as a matter of fact, since I have you on, what are you thinking? It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, just kind of a general idea of where you might want to go with it.
The specific topic I want to talk about is, why cybersecurity is important or like how people, so it's either that or it's how people, because in cybersecurity, half the people are like, no, don't take our data. Like, we don't want protection, just leave us alone. And then the other half are like, it's okay, you can use our information, just keep us safe.
Gotcha. So you're looking at things like cybersecurity, security protections, things like that.
Mhm.
um a good thing to kind of look at is also like GDPR, right? GDPR being the EU's privacy regulations
Yeah.
on the web. There's also a version of that in California that's kind of a watered down version of GDPR. um so that's a really good topic. Now, looking at the overall question, or the overall topic of like cybersecurity or internet privacy, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting topic. So when it comes to the actual research question, now what we're looking at in terms of the research question is you want to have a question that's going to have some sort of debate. So what I would recommend for all of you is to stay away from the hows and go towards the shoulds. So should the United States have a national internet privacy policy? Yes or no? Because then that provides for yes or no.
Yeah.
Or should
Yeah.
there be availability? Should there be expansion of like Section 215 of the Patriot Act? Or should there be, or should there, looking at like Section 230, should there be a reform of Section 230, or maybe a repeal of Section 230 for the Federal Communications Act, which is how things like Twitter and Facebook kind of exist.
Mhm.
So those are some really cool things. Don't worry, this is all getting recorded and posted on Facebook, on YouTube, so you'll be able to take a look at this again as we're talking about it. But that's how we should kind of be thinking about framing the question. And that's one of the big things that we're going to be talking about is by framing the question is, should there be GDPR in the United States? Should there be a national privacy standard, or should there be a repeal or replacement of Section 230 of the Federal Communications Act, or maybe something looking at like the intelligence community's ability to have domestic surveillance, should there be a reform of Section 215 of the Patriot Act? It
Mhm.
just so happens that cybersecurity and national security is my bread and butter, and like
Okay.
what a lot of what I worked on in grad school. So, like this is right up my alley.
Okay, I had a quick question too. How
Mhm.
long does the paper have to be? I'm sorry if you answered this already.
Oh yeah, well, we're talking like 3 months from now. It's gonna be it'll be 2,000 words, so it'll be about the final paper that we submit will be about 9 to 11 pages.
Okay. Because I
But
don't want the topic to be so specific where I can't talk about anything but just, those things.
yeah, well, you're gonna have plenty to talk about if you, for instance, if you're talking about cybersecurity or Section
Uh,
230, you're gonna have plenty to talk about. And the whole point of all of the stuff that we're working on throughout the quarter or throughout the semester is to gain research, understanding, knowledge of the topic. So by the time that you're at the end of the semester, you're like this mini subject matter expert. And so you're able to talk rather detail in pretty significant detail on the issues itself, because you're not just looking at the final paper is not just looking at the topic itself, but the arguments for and against the specific issue.
okay.
So you're actually going to look at why should there be why are there those who say there should be a section 230 reform? Why do people think there shouldn't be? That's a really heated one, as a matter of fact. I think you'd find a lot of stuff on Section 230, the Federal Communications Act.
Yeah.
um but that's how you're framing it. So you're not just looking at one topic and just running it down. You're looking at both sides of the argument for the final of why there should or shouldn't be reforms on, like, let's say Section 230.
Okay.
um if that gives you kind of a better idea of what we're looking at. And so when you do your hot newspaper, which will be the first paper coming up
Mhm.
at the end of the month, you're going to be focusing on a news story and looking at that news story, that the same news story from three different news publications, a mainstream one, a web-based one, and a international source. And you're going to look at the similarities and differences in coverage. And what you're going to do with that is the actual story itself will act as kind of a control variable. So it will run the same across all of them. So that way you're able to look at the independent variables of, how was the coverage different.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's how that'll work. So in terms of determining questions. Awesome. uh Anyone else, like, what are you guys thinking about? This is a prime opportunity to kind of throw anything at me for me to kind of help and discuss.
I know we discussed mine in your office hours, and I was thinking about like a couple more subjects.
Mhm. But
Like
for the sake of people watching, feel free to go ahead and talk.
okay, I had like idea like should college be free in the U.S. I just find it crazy how they expect us to invest in ourselves, and some colleges are like $30,000 to $40,000 a year, and you have to take out a loan. By the time you're like 20 years old, you're already like so many thousand of dollars in debt.
Hmm.
Um, And like the other one, it's like, should guns be banned in the U.S.? I know that's like a hot topic
Hmm.
in recent years because of the shootings and stuff.
Hmm.
So there's like just a couple I was just throwing around.
Well, having like, for instance, free public college, or free, for instance, even free community college is a good one. That has a lot of stuff to find about it. There's an economic stimulus argument about relieving people of debt. As a matter of fact, just today, this morning, um, Majority Leader Schumer and Senator Warren, amongst a couple of others, have like held a press conference today about moving forward on a proposal to um, give $50,000 in debt forgiveness for college loans. So there was that just happened this morning. See why the news is so important to watch? Uh,
Wait, what was it?
huh?
What was it?
There was a press conference this morning with Majority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, amongst a few others in the House. They gave a press conference about a proposal that they would like to put to the floor about, and then encouraging President Biden to kind of endorse it, about debt forgiveness of up to $50,000.
Oh wow.
So there's an economic argument for it that, if you relieve that debt, then there creates more liquidity in the market. People are more able to spend money. People aren't having to be dragged down. People can take out loans because it's not a big impediment to like taking a home loan or a car loan or things that, can actually generate wealth, like good debt. And the argument that for so long is that, well, college is good debt because you're able to, you're increasing your human capital by taking out those loans and you're investing in yourself. But as we've seen recently, the market really hasn't been as forgiving as it used to be. That used to be, a pretty sound investment. Spend $100,000 and go to, medical school, you'll probably do fine. But, the market and the job market and prospects, particularly for people in their early 20s to early 30s, considering the Great Recession and then the pandemic, I've definitely had that's definitely gone the other way around. So there's an argument about whether or not there should be a proposal for $50,000 debt forgiveness. So yeah, this was on the news this morning. This is why you guys need to watch the news. And there's a whole list. If you go to news sources in Blackboard, feel free to check out any of those. I just need you to be paying attention to what's going on. It's going to help you immensely in terms of finding material for this course. So looking at debt forgiveness, that's a pretty interesting, or looking at like free college, that's a really interesting one. And then you were also talking about, you said banning guns.
Yeah, about like because the whole Second Amendment, like, is it still needed? Is it still relevant?
Well, good luck having a constitutional convention on getting rid of the Second Amendment. However, what you can do is that would be a little bit that would have more for you to chew on. Would actually be a reinstatement of the assault weapons ban that lapsed in 2006. So President Bill Clinton, in the mid 90s, was able to pass what was called the assault weapons ban, which banned particular types of weapons that were deemed military in nature or assault style in nature from the public. And it's not without precedent because, for instance, you can't buy a bazooka as a civilian or a rocket launcher. You can't have a nuclear weapon, because it doesn't say guns in the Constitution, it says arms. So there has been some precedent in Congress, in legislation, and in the courts that there can be reasonable restrictions on gun control. There can be reasonable gun control laws, federal background checks, things like that. So if you're looking at something about banning weapons, the best port of call you could look at if you're looking into it would be whether or not we should reinstate the assault weapons ban. It was allowed to lapse in 2006 during George W. Bush's tenure. So that would be something really cool to look at. And then the question that you would have is, should the United States reinstate the assault weapons ban? So your topic is broadly gun control. The question that you would have, the actual research question. So you notice that in the form, there's two questions. The first two questions are, well, what is the topic broadly? Well, the topic broadly, if we were talking about what Freddie was talking about, would be gun control broadly. Or, or what Nikita was talking about, either cybersecurity or, free speech, if you're talking about Section 230. So that would be like speech on the internet. So those would be the broad topics that you're talking about. And then the actual research question that we would be looking at is, for Freddie, like, should the United States reinstate the assault weapons ban? So that's what you're looking at. When you have when you're looking at your research question, it should be a debate. There should be some sort of conflict in order for you to successfully use that as your controversial topic. And so hopefully that gives you a better idea of like how you should be formulating these things. You still have like 5 days to do this, so which is why I wanted to have this discussion now. And then for people watching this later on, they have a better idea of like how to formulate their question, how to think about their question, how to think about what their topic is. So that's something that I think will be really helpful. What about Elisa or Kayla? What about you guys? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about parental licensing.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a really, really good one. You can kind of see parental licensing is a big one, and there's not states that have really done parental licensing, but the analog that you can look at is foster care licensing. And because, for instance, in California, it's pretty restrictive, but in Florida, you pretty much just need a pulse. And so there's been some really interesting and tragic cases, for instance, in Florida and other states that have had relatively lax rules on who's eligible to be a foster parent. And so I think you might find some really interesting stuff in there. And there's some other questions that you can look at, like a comparative analysis. You can see like, well, what have other countries have done in terms of parental licensing? If that's the case, like how would you enforce that? You know, how is parental licensing enforced? You know, so if you have a baby and you don't have a license, does Child Protective Services get involved? Like there's a question about how would you actually enforce something like that? Um, but the cool thing that you can do is that parental licensing, like theoretically, is a really, really interesting topic. And it's broadly discussed, particularly I know in child development circles. This has been a relatively popular topic in this course for people to bring up, and they've done it with great success. So I think it's a really good topic, you know, whether or not there should be parental licensing in the United States.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, definitely. What about Paras?
Yeah, I haven't really decided yet, but I was thinking maybe
Yeah.
something to do with maybe like Google privacy issues.
Yeah, and don't worry, like this is why I'm at, because this isn't due until like 5 days, which is why I'm like, hey, just throw anything at the wall right now. That way we can talk about it.
Yeah, so I was thinking about doing the Google privacy issue or maybe something on like cryptocurrency or maybe the GameStop issue that's going on right now.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? You know, with stock manipulations, short squeezes. That's some really interesting things. That's really interesting. I mean, you know, there's questions about whether or not Glass-Steagall needs to be reinstated. With that, you know, because once Glass-Steagall got removed in the 90s, commercial banks and investment banks, you know, could merge and could operate jointly. And you know, one of the big problems that you have with that is that with investment banks and commercial banks merging is you pretty much have, you know, the investment bank acting as the casino and the commercial banks are acting as the house, you know, just pumping in money. And so, which is how we got into, you know, the CBOs and credit default swaps and mortgage-backed security issues of, you know, 2006, 2008. So, which ended up, you know, resulting in the Great Recession. So that's some really interesting stuff. If you want to have some fun looking at about like financial institutions and shorting and whatnot, watch The Big Short. That's a really good. I think that would give you a good idea of you wanting to do that. I actually used to show that The Big Short in class as a topic of discussion. I thought that was a really good movie. That's actually an extra credit film that's available to watch that I post later on in the term. But looking at the financial markets, are you an economist? Are you are you an economics major?
No, I just do this because my brother and my sister kind of encouraged me to get into like stocks and cryptocurrency and stuff. So I actually have I have a Coinbase account and stuff. So I know a
Oh,
little
nice.
bit about it, but yeah, I'm not really into it like too much yet.
What's your major? Computer science?
No, I'm a healthcare management.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, crypto is another one. Whether or not cryptocurrency should be considered uh, a legitimate currency in the United States, like if it should be if the government should recognize cryptocurrency as a legitimate monetary, as a legitimate currency, because there's a big problem with that. There's a lot of governments that don't want cryptocurrency to be recognized. Uh, and so that also brings into question the fiat capacity of the value of like the dollar and the pound and other global currencies, the euro. So to bring cryptocurrency in there could definitely fluctuate the monetary markets. It would be really interesting. It'd be the Wild West. But some people really want it. Some people see like Bitcoin and even Dogecoin is going up, which is really interesting. And for those of you who don't know what Dogecoin is, I mean, it was cryptocurrency that started as a joke, and now it's actually having some value. But there also, the arguments also could be, with blockchain and having this distributed ledger with cryptocurrency, that there could be some that the currency is actually more stable would be one of the other arguments, and less susceptible to fraud. Problem is that because it's a cryptocurrency, it's the transactions are ripe for the black market. So by having cryptocurrency be legitimate or legitimately recognized, you may end up writing a blank check to just make it easier for people to buy stuff on the black market. So it like recognizing cryptocurrency as having governments recognize cryptocurrency is a big one if you're interested in stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Yeah, hopefully that gives you a couple of ideas of things to follow. And by the way, nobody worry about writing any of this down. It's all getting recorded, so you're fine. What about Kayla? What do you think?
Haven't really sat and thought about it yet. I was going to do that today, so I don't really have anything right now.
Anything that comes to mind? Well, what's your major?
Graphic design and marketing.
Ooh, that's really good. There's a couple of things, especially just inside of your field, that are really interesting. I know a couple of my students have done things about the devaluation of female art in galleries. The deflated prices of female artists is one that's been really interesting. Another one, if you're looking at graphic art and design, is the propensity of whitewashing, even in modern cinema, which is really interesting, or even within advertisements. That's an interesting one. Another one that is really cool when it comes to like graphic design, marketing. Let's see. Body image is another one that's really interesting about, whether or not market forces or like marketers should be socially responsible or socially conscious about how they represent their product. There was like high praise a couple of years ago about the Dove True Body campaign a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think I remember of that.
Mm-hmm. And that's really cool. But there's also like some interesting backlash about like ladies big and tall stores like Lane Bryant, for instance, that kind of got into hot water with very kind of hourglass figure shaped models. Even though they were plus size models, they were still invoking the same kind of body shape. So there's been some critiques on that, which have been really interesting. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff to dive into, and even just outside of graphic design, marketing, things like that. You can venture out to whatever you're interested in. But I just kind of wanted to give you a couple of ideas.
Yeah, those are good ones. Thank you.
You're welcome. Freddie, you had a question.
Yeah. Just given everything that's been happening this past summer, what do you think about like a topic about like police reform or like reforming like prisons and stuff like that, like letting like nonviolent offenders out early for good behavior and stuff like that? Or
Well, I mean, you can even go one further. I mean, there are people arguing that you should decriminalize drugs like Portugal, considering that most of the people who are inside of prison currently are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. The lion's share of people, or whether or not that sentencing for petty drug crime should be commuted. The problem is that once people get out of prison, you still have a lot of impediments to like employment, you have impediments in terms of getting a job, in terms of getting housing, you know, in terms of like when a renter or a landlord does a background check and they see that you have a criminal record, you know, the ban the box issue is definitely a big one, where you don't pull a criminal record until after you've already brought in the applicant for an interview, because that seems to be kind of the hardest part, is just getting someone in the door to have a discussion and an interview. So there's still a lot of impediments, even if you just, you know, let people out early, you still have that. So one of the larger questions is, well, how do we prevent people from getting in there in the first place? Um, you know, whether or not we should ban private prisons is another one that's a big question. Uh, because there's a financial incentive to keep people in prison, or have longer terms. There was a really, really nasty case in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago where a judge was caught getting kickbacks by putting these really draconian sentences in juvenile court and sending these kids to juvenile hall, or these juvenile prison facilities for really like significant amounts of time, where, you know, where if it was 3 months, it was more like 9 months or a year, in these private juvenile halls. And then lo and behold, they ended up finding out that the judge was getting a kickback, is for every person that he put in that prison. He ended up getting in big trouble for that. But yeah, that was about 12 years ago. I think that was in Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania at large. I think it was Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, something like that. But there's a whole load of things that you could look into in terms of criminal justice reform. If you're looking at police reform, universal use of body cameras is one. You know, whether or not there should be either a mental health professional or social work professional as part of a 911 response, as opposed to just the police. You know, there's a big argument even coming from some police officers that are like, you're asking us to do too many things. You know, the current police department has to be just standard, you know, police officer, you know, stopping crime, giving tickets, making sure that people are safe, you know, securing crime scenes, things like that. Then they also have to be mini DEA agents because of, you know, the multitude of drug laws that we have, and because of the way that we've structured, you know, the counterterrorism apparatus in the United States. They also have to be, you know, mini counterterrorism agents, and because we've lowered the amount of staffing and resources for mental health facilities and social work, like they have to be on domestic violence, social work, and mental illness calls. So, you know, there is a lot demanded of a police officer currently that, you know, that they're not necessarily, you know, the most suited or trained for. And, you know, many police departments will be the first to admit it. And so there's a big question right now about how to implement um, mental health or social services into 911 response calls, particularly for things like 5150 calls, like suicide calls, or you know, or mental distress calls, or domestic violence. So those are some things that could be useful. There are some pilot programs that have happened. I know even in my hometown, the city of Whittier has tried that. I think Rialto has a pilot program of putting in social workers to join in on 911 response calls with police. So there's some departments that are actually trying this, and from what my understanding is, it's actually been quite successful. So there's some really good stuff there.
Do you think, because I know my younger brother's looking to become a cop, and from what I've heard him say, it's the requirement he just has to be like 21, like a certain age,
Mhm.
and join a police academy. So do you think like a topic like, should the requirements to become a police officer like change? Like, should they require like a college education?
Yeah,
Or
as a matter of fact, one of my first students, I think in the second quarter I ever taught, did that, and it was brilliant. That's a really good one, whether or not there should be increased requirements for police officers in the United States. Whether or not there should be a national standard is another question, because remember, a lot of these standards are done at the local level, at the state and county level. You know, what these can be. And the other thing too is you don't want to make them too restrictive either, because then you could have a shortage. You could have a shortage of police officers. So people, you know, I'm sure many of you know that you could be perfectly qualified for the position even though you don't have the piece of paper. So you don't want to also limit in places where there's already a shortened supply or a need for police officers. You don't want to make sure that you make the requirements too onerous that people then, lack incentive to apply, who could be possibly very talented people. So there's a big debate about, like, okay, if we increase the standards, well, what should those standards be? And so there is a debate and argument about that.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Anyone else have some interesting questions? I love this, by the way. Please, this like Q&A sessions are my favorite.
Should college athletes be paid?
That's another good one. I think I actually have that on the list. Anybody else have any other questions that they might want to have regarding the topic or how to submit it or anything else? Any kind of housekeeping? Cool. So just to make sure that everybody does, you'll find it on Blackboard and you'll see the actual Google Forms link. And it's actually already set up in the assignments page, and it's also in the controversial research topic page. So there's multiple places on the Blackboard site to access the form. Just make sure you go ahead and fill it out. Please be sure to enter in your name, last name, and then first name. The instructions are there on the form. And then also make sure to properly put what section you're in, either section 5 or section 6. There's a drop-down menu in that form when you open it up. And then as soon as you hit submit, you'll go ahead and get a confirmation, and then that will go ahead and get reported to me. So that'll be great. With that, I hope everyone does well. Thank you very much. And remember, this is a preliminary thing that we're turning in these forms. These forms are so we can kind of have this larger discussion with everybody that we're doing today. I just kind of wanted to get the ball rolling. And then a week from today, from Thursday, I encourage as many people as you can, if they can show up on next Thursday. That would be February, making sure I got my dates right because it's COVID and days don't matter. Thursday the 11th. So if you possibly can come on Thursday the 11th, if for you who are watching on YouTube, that would be from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Because what we're going to be doing is having kind of a larger roundtable discussion about all of this stuff and see what people kind of came down on. And, I'll be able to provide like, hey, you should be looking at these resources or this news source, or there's something that happened here. So I want to give you as much, much of a kickstart as I can, or jumpstart as I can, for you to really hit the ground running. So with that, I will see you guys next week.